dying cowboy gave his medicine to a native. But the tribe did something no one speaks of. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. In the harsh expanse of the western frontier, there lived a dying cowboy named Jack. He had seen the harsh winds of fate blow him into a life of solitude, a life where time seemed to stand still. His body, worn from years of hard labor, ached more than it ever had before. His once strong hands, now trembling, could barely hold onto the reins of his horse. His health had slowly deteriorated, a constant reminder that life in the Wild West was unforgiving. One cold evening, Jack was riding along the dusty trail when he spotted a figure in the distance. It was a young native man, his face obscured by a hooded cloak, limping along the path. Jack approached him cautiously, his instincts telling him something wasn't right. As he got closer, he saw the man's wound, a deep gash across his side that had clearly been untreated for far too long. Without a second thought, Jack guided his horse to the side of the injured man. "You need help," Jack said, his voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. The native man looked up, his eyes filled with pain, but also something else, recognition. It was as if he knew Jack had come to offer aid. With great effort, Jack helped him onto his horse, supporting the man as best as he could. He guided them both back to his small, modest cabin. Inside, Jack quickly gathered what little supplies he had left, herbs, bandages, and a mixture of medicine he had learned to make over the years. He wasn't a trained healer, but he had a lifetime of experience in the wilderness, and that was enough to keep a person alive when every second counted. As he worked, Jack's thoughts wandered. He had seen many things in his life, cattle drives, gunfights, and moments of quiet reflection under the open sky. But this was different. The man he had helped wasn't just a stranger. There was something about him, something that felt deeply significant, as if their paths had crossed for a reason. Jack had no way of knowing it, but this simple act of kindness, giving medicine to a stranger, would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. After the man had settled down to rest, Jack sat by the fire, watching the flames flicker and dance in the cold night. His mind was heavy with the weight of the world, but there was a sense of calm knowing he had done something good for someone else. Little did he know that the native man he had saved was not just a wanderer. He was from a tribe that valued honor, respect, and the balance of life. As Jack sat there, exhausted from his day, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something that would come to him from the tribe in a way that no one could have predicted. As the night deepened, Jack sat by the fire, his thoughts swirling like the smoke curling upward into the dark sky. He had done something good for a stranger, and yet a heavy feeling hung in the air. The man he had helped, whose name was still unknown to him, had fallen into a deep, restful sleep, his breathing steady and calm. Jack had done what he could, but something told him this was not the end of their story. Hours passed, the fire flickered low, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching. Just as the embers began to die down, there was a knock at the door. The sound was quiet, almost gentle, but enough to pierce the silence of the cabin. Jack hesitated. He wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, he rose to his feet, gripping the rifle by his side, and approached the door cautiously. As he opened it, he was met with the sight of a man on horseback, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. The horse stood still, breathing in the cold night air. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse but steady. The man's gaze was intense, sharp, and calculating, though he said nothing at first. Instead, he stepped off his horse and approached Jack with an air of authority. "I am the leader of the tribe," the man said finally, his voice strong but calm. "I have come to speak with you." Jack's heart raced. This was no ordinary man. This was the chief of the tribe, and his presence brought with it a sense of urgency that Jack could not ignore. "What is it that you want?" Jack asked, though his body tensed. The chief looked at the cabin, taking in the humble surroundings. "You have saved one of our own," the chief began, his words heavy with meaning. "And for that, we are grateful." Jack nodded. though the feeling of unease did not leave him. "I've only done what anyone would have done," Jack said, his voice quiet. He was hurt. "I couldn't just leave him there." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a brief pause. "Your kindness does not go unnoticed," the chief said, his voice carrying a weight of ancient knowledge. "But there is something more at play here than you realize." Jack's confusion deepened. He had thought the matter would end with the simple act of helping a man in need. He had given his medicine, his time, and his hospitality. Yet, it seemed there was more to this than he had anticipated. The chief motioned for Jack to follow him outside. "Come with me," the chief said, and Jack, though reluctant, followed. Outside, the moonlight bathed the world in a cold glow, and in the distance, Jack could see the flicker of torches. A group of warriors appeared from the shadows, their faces stern and unreadable. There were at least 30 of them, maybe more, standing in perfect formation. They were silent, almost reverent, as if waiting for something. Jack's heart beat faster. "What is all this?" Jack asked, his voice now edged with concern. "Why have you brought them here?" The chief looked at Jack, his expression unreadable. "You have healed one of our own," the chief said. "But this is not a simple repayment of kindness. There is more that you must understand." Jack's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. The warriors before him stood like statues, their eyes fixed on him. The air seemed to thrum with tension, but still, no one spoke. "What do you expect from me?" Jack asked, his voice shaking with uncertainty. The chief remained silent for a moment, then slowly turned to the warriors. One of them stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in cloth. The chief took it from the warrior and held it out to Jack. It was a small leather pouch, intricately beaded, and as Jack reached out to take it, a strange sensation washed over him. This was not just any gift. This was something of great importance. Jack looked at the chief, his mind still reeling. "What is this?" Jack asked, his voice barely a whisper. The chief's eyes bore into his. "This is the gift of life," the chief said, "and it comes with a price." The leather pouch felt heavier in Jack's hand than he could have ever imagined. The intricate beading, vibrant in the moonlight, shimmered with an energy he couldn't explain. He hesitated, staring at it in confusion. What could this small object possibly mean? The chief, standing motionless beside him, watched intently, as if waiting for Jack to understand something without words. Slowly, Jack opened the pouch, his hands shaking slightly, and inside, nestled in soft cloth, were a few small, carefully arranged herbs. He couldn't make sense of it. He had seen many types of plants in his time in the wild, but these were different. They glowed faintly, almost as if they held a secret power within them. The chief took a step closer, his presence imposing but calm. "These herbs are the key," he said quietly, his voice steady and clear. "Slow not. There are forces in this land that seek to destroy us. Your medicine has already proven itself. But we need more than medicine. We need strength, and we need allies. If you accept this, you will be bound to our tribe's fate." Jack felt a surge of uncertainty flood through him. He had lived a hard life, but it had been his own. Now, he was being asked to step into a world that was unfamiliar and far beyond his control. The chief didn't wait for Jack's answer. "You will come with us," he said firmly. "There is much you must learn." Without another word, the chief turned and signaled to his warriors. One by one, the group began to move, silently but purposefully. Jack, though reluctant, found himself following. The night air was cold as they moved through the wilderness, the path lit only by the faint glow of the moon and the flickering torches carried by the tribe. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was happening. As they journeyed deeper into the heart of the territory, the tribe's settlement came into view. It was a secluded place, hidden among the hills, surrounded by thick trees and a sense of quiet power. The warriors moved in perfect synchrony, and Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of their presence. They were not just a group of people. They were a force of nature, united by a purpose he still didn't fully understand. They reached the central area of the settlement, a large fire burning at its heart, surrounded by structures that seemed both ancient and resilient. The chief led Jack to the center, where a gathering of tribal elders stood waiting. The air was thick with anticipation. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as the chief spoke to the elders in their language, his words strong but respectful. Jack couldn't understand the conversation, But he knew this moment was crucial. The elders nodded in agreement, and the chief turned to Jack. "This is your test," he said solemnly. "You must decide if you will join us fully or walk away. Your actions will determine the future of not only our people, but your own as well." Jack stood in the circle of warriors and elders, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He had saved one life, but now he was being asked to save many, to become part of a cause that was larger than anything he had ever known. The question lingered in the air, unspoken but clear. Would he stand with them, or would he walk away from a world that was calling him to something greater? The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the tribe's settlement. Jack stood in the center, surrounded by the tribe's elders and warriors. The decision weighed heavily on him. He had come here out of simple compassion for one man. But now, standing before the tribe, he faced a challenge far greater than he had ever anticipated. The chief's words echoed in his mind, urging him to make a choice. Your actions will determine the future. Jack had saved a life, but now he was being asked to give more than just medicine. He was being asked to stand with them, to fight for their survival. The elders watched him carefully, their faces unreadable. Jack could feel their eyes on him, studying him as if he were an enigma they needed to solve. Slowly, he spoke, his voice rough and uncertain. "I don't know what you expect of me," he began. "I'm just a cowboy. I've spent my life alone. I've never been a part of something like this." The chief stepped forward, his presence commanding yet calm. "You are not just a cowboy, Jack. You are a man who has shown kindness when others would not. That is why you are here." Jack's mind raced. He had never thought of himself as anything special. He was just a man trying to survive in a world that was often unforgiving. But the chief's words made him wonder. Maybe there was more to him than he had realized. "What is it that you want from me?" Jack asked, his voice steadying as he looked directly at the chief. The chief's gaze softened, but there was a determination in his eyes. "We are at war, Jack," he said. "There are those who seek to destroy us. They want our land, our way of life, and we are prepared to defend it. But we cannot do it alone." Jack looked at the warriors standing around him. He had seen their strength, their unity, but he knew that even they could not win this battle on their own. "What can I do?" Jack asked, his voice filled with both curiosity and fear. The chief's eyes gleamed with a mixture of respect and resolve. "You will join us," he said simply. "You will help us defend our people. And in return, we will protect you. Together, we will fight to survive." The weight of the chief's words settled over Jack like a heavy blanket. He was being asked to fight, to risk his life for something greater than himself. It was a choice that terrified him, but in his heart, he knew there was no turning back. The tribe had already shown him their trust, their respect. Now, it was his turn to return that trust. The chief motioned for Jack to follow him, and together, they walked toward the council fire where the tribe's warriors had gathered. The fire crackled and danced in the night, casting long shadows over the land. Jack's mind was filled with uncertainty, but his heart was also filled with a strange sense of purpose. He was no longer just a man wandering the wilds, alone and forgotten. He was part of something now, something bigger than himself. As he stood among the warriors, the chief raised his hand, and the tribe fell silent. "This man," the chief began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, "has proven his loyalty to us. He has saved one of our own. Now, he will fight with us." The warriors nodded in unison, their faces grim but resolute. Jack's heart beat faster as he realized what he was about to commit to. This was no simple battle. This was a fight for survival, for the very existence of the tribe. And now he was a part of it. The chief turned to Jack and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are not alone," he said, his voice low but reassuring. "We fight together." Jack nodded, his mind still racing. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a cowboy. He was a warrior now, standing side by side with the tribe. And whatever came next, he would face it with them as one. The fire crackled louder, and the tribe's warriors began to prepare for the coming battle. Jack could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, but there was also a sense of clarity. He had chosen his path, and there was no turning back now. Together, they would fight, and together, they would survive. As the days passed, Jack found himself falling into a new rhythm with the tribe. He trained with the warriors, learning their ways, their strategies, and the strength they drew from the land. The chief had kept his word. Jack was no longer just a cowboy. He was now a part of something much larger, something that resonated deep within him. The tribe's warriors were unlike any men Jack had ever encountered. They were fierce, disciplined, and bound by an unspoken bond that held them together. It was as if the land itself had woven them into a single, unstoppable force. The days were spent in preparation. The tribe, under the leadership of the chief, had begun to organize a defense, knowing the enemy was coming. Jack's skills with a rifle, honed over years of working the land, were valuable to them. But it was the strength in unity, the way the tribe moved together as one, that truly set them apart. Jack had learned quickly that this was not just about survival. This was about honor, respect, and protecting the land that had sustained the tribe for generations. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky with vibrant reds and oranges, the chief called a meeting. The tribe gathered around the council fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. Jack stood beside the chief, his heart pounding in his chest. "The time has come," the chief said, his voice strong and unwavering. "They are coming, and we will stand our ground. We fight for our people, our way of life, and the land that is ours." The warriors around the fire nodded in agreement, their expressions grim but determined. Jack's eyes met the chief's, and for the first time, he understood the weight of the responsibility that had been placed upon him. This was no longer just about defending the tribe. This was about preserving something far more important. The chief turned to Jack. "You are with us now," he said. "We will fight together, and together, we will survive." Jack nodded, the gravity of the moment settling in his chest. He had come here as a stranger, someone who had offered a simple act of kindness. But now, he was a warrior, bound by the same purpose as the men and women around him. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his small shelter, listening to the sounds of the camp. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees, and the crackling of the fire seemed to echo in his mind. He thought about his life before all of this, the solitude, the endless days spent alone on the ranch, far from any real purpose. Now, with the tribe, he had found something he never knew he needed, belonging. But as the night grew darker, a new feeling stirred within him. He was no longer just a man fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for something much larger, something that would affect generations to come. The next morning, the warriors began to move. Jack joined them, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his heart steady but his mind sharp. The enemy was coming, and the tribe would not be caught off guard. They moved through the land, their steps silent, their eyes focused. The chief led them with quiet authority, never once looking back. The tribe had faced many challenges before, but this time was different. This time, they were ready. As the sun rose high in the sky, Jack could feel the tension building. They had reached the edge of the tribe's territory, where the trees thinned out and the open plains stretched before them. In the distance, he could see the dust rising, signaling the arrival of the enemy. The time had come. Jack took a deep breath, his grip tightening on his rifle. The tribe was ready, and so was he. The warriors formed a line, their faces set with determination. The chief stood at the front, his gaze unwavering. "We fight for what is ours," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing that no matter what happened next, they would fight together. As the enemy drew closer, Jack's heart beat faster, but there was no fear, only resolve. They would stand their ground, and they would protect their home. The battle was about to begin. The air was thick with tension as Jack and the tribe stood poised, ready for the battle ahead. The enemy was only moments away from arriving, and every warrior, every fighter, was silent, focused, their eyes locked on the horizon. Jack could feel the weight of what was about to happen, the responsibility of standing alongside the tribe, the people who had taken him in and made him one of their own. The leader of the tribe, the chief, stood at the front, his posture strong and unwavering. He was the symbol of resilience, the protector of his people, and the guiding force that had brought them all together. Jack had never seen a man so focused, so resolute. "We fight for survival, for our families, for our way of life," the chief said, his voice cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. Jack nodded, gripping his rifle tighter, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what to expect, But he knew he wasn't walking into this alone. Behind him, the warriors were ready, waiting for the command to move. In the distance, the dust clouds rose higher as the enemy drew nearer. The ground seemed to shake under the thunderous approach of their horses. Jack could hear the faint sound of hooves, growing louder by the second. The battle was about to begin. The chief raised his hand, signaling for the warriors to prepare. "Remember," he said, his voice now soft but filled with power. "We are not fighting for glory or fame. We are fighting for what is ours. We are fighting for our people, for the land that has sustained us for generations. And we will not let anyone take that from us." Jack felt a surge of determination rise within him. He wasn't just fighting for the tribe anymore. He was fighting for something much deeper. He was fighting for the bond that had been forged between him and these people. The enemy appeared in the distance, their numbers far greater than Jack had anticipated. But the tribe didn't flinch. They stood together, a unified front against the oncoming threat. As the enemy drew closer, the chief motioned for the warriors to advance. With swift precision, they moved as one, their every step calculated, their every action deliberate. Jack followed their lead, his rifle at the ready. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation as the two forces met in the open field. The sound of hooves pounding the earth, the clash of metal against metal, and the cries of warriors filled the air. Jack felt the heat of the battle surge through him. He fired his rifle, the shot ringing out across the battlefield. But it wasn't just the gunfire that drove him forward. It was the knowledge that he wasn't just a lone cowboy anymore. He was part of something much bigger, something that had the power to protect, to defend, and to survive. The battle raged on, but the tribe fought with everything they had. Every strike, every move was a testament to their strength, their unity. The enemy, though greater in number, was no match for the spirit of the tribe. Jack fought alongside them, his heart racing with every step. He had never experienced anything like this before. The sheer force of will, the unity that came from fighting not just for survival, but for something sacred. The battle seemed to stretch on forever, the outcome uncertain. But Jack could feel the tide turning. The enemy began to falter, their lines breaking, their resolve weakening. The tribe pressed forward, relentless in their defense. Jack fired again, his shot true, taking down one of the enemy warriors. As he did, he realized that this wasn't just about the battle anymore. It was about protecting the future, about securing a place for the generations to come. And with that realization, a new sense of purpose filled him. The enemy was retreating now, their forces scattering in every direction. The battle was won. But as Jack stood there, catching his breath, the chief came to his side. "You fought well," the chief said, his voice filled with respect. Jack nodded, still trying to absorb what had just happened. "We fought together," he said, his words strong. "That's what makes us powerful." The chief smiled, a rare gesture of warmth from a man who had seen so much war, so much loss. "Yes," he agreed. "Together, we are stronger than we could ever be alone." As the tribe celebrated their victory, Jack stood by the fire, watching the flames dance in the night. He had come here as an outsider, a cowboy with no real place in the world. But now, surrounded by the people who had taken him in, he felt something he had never known before, belonging. The battle was over, but the war for their survival was far from finished. Jack knew there would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But he was ready to stand with the tribe, ready to face whatever came. Next, together. The victory was bittersweet. Though the tribe had pushed the enemy back, the cost of the battle had left a deep mark on everyone. Jack stood beside the chief, watching the warriors gather their fallen. Their faces were grim, their bodies weary, but there was also a quiet sense of pride in their eyes. They had defended their land, their people, and their way of life. Jack had witnessed the full power of the tribe's unity, but now, as the dust settled, the reality of what they had achieved, and what they still had to protect, became even clearer. The chief's voice broke through Jack's thoughts. "We have won this battle," he said, his gaze sweeping over the tribe. "But this is only the beginning. There will be more to come." Jack nodded, his heart heavy with the understanding of just how fragile their victory was. He had fought alongside these people, but he knew that their enemies were relentless. They had survived this time, but how many more challenges would they face before peace could truly be won? As the days passed, Jack immersed himself even further into the life of the tribe. He trained alongside the warriors, learning more about their tactics, their culture, and their connection to the land. The chief often took him aside, sharing wisdom about survival, leadership, and the strength that came from unity. Jack had come to respect the chief not just as a leader, but as a father figure. His quiet strength and unwavering determination were qualities Jack now admired deeply. Despite the losses, the tribe's spirit remained unbroken. The survivors gathered around the council fire at night, sharing stories of past battles, of ancestors who had fought and survived. They celebrated their victories, no matter how small, and honored those who had fallen. Jack had never experienced such a sense of community, such a deep connection between people. It was something he had never found in his solitary life on the ranch. It was clear now that the bond between the tribe and Jack was more than just an alliance. It was a connection of trust, respect, and shared purpose. One evening, as the campfire flickered and the tribe gathered, the chief called for a meeting. "We have learned much from the enemy's tactics," he said, his voice steady. "We will not be caught off guard again. Our enemies are many, but we are stronger than they realize. We fight not just for survival, but for the future of our people." The tribe's warriors nodded, their expressions fierce, ready to do whatever was necessary to protect their land. Jack stood beside the chief, feeling the weight of those words. The battle had taught him something invaluable. Survival was not guaranteed, but the strength to fight for what was right. This was something they could control. The chief turned to Jack. "You have proven yourself, Jack," he said. "Your strength, your courage, it has earned the respect of our people. You are no longer just an outsider. You are one of us." Jack felt a swell of pride at the chief's words, but there was also a tinge of uncertainty. He had fought alongside the tribe, but could he truly be a part of them? Could he live the rest of his life as one of the people he had once viewed as strangers? As the chief continued speaking, Jack's mind wandered. His old life, his old ways, seemed so distant now. The cowboy who had lived alone on the ranch was gone. In his place was someone who had learned the value of community, of unity, and of protecting what mattered most. The chief's voice brought Jack back to the present. "We face many challenges ahead, but we will face them together. We will protect our land, our families, and our future, and we will not be afraid." Jack's heart swelled with emotion. The tribe had become his family, and he would fight alongside them until the end. That night, as the stars glittered overhead, Jack sat by the fire, his thoughts filled with both hope and uncertainty. The road ahead was unclear, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready for whatever it might bring. He was no longer alone. He had a purpose, and he would fight to protect it, just as the tribe had fought to protect him. The future was uncertain, but with the tribe by his side, Jack knew he wasn't fighting for survival alone. He was fighting for a future, for a life worth living, for a people worth protecting. The days that followed the battle were filled with preparation. Jack had learned quickly that the fight for survival was far from over. The tribe had won the battle, but the enemy had retreated. Not defeated. They would return, and the tribe needed to be ready. Jack stood alongside the chief, his rifle now a constant companion, ready for whatever came next. The warriors trained relentlessly, honing their skills and strategies. The chief, ever the calm and steady leader, guided them, his voice always firm, never wavering. "We will stand strong," he said, his words like a beacon in the storm. "We will defend what is ours." Jack's heart swelled with pride every time he heard those words. He had become a part of something much bigger than himself. The tribe had accepted him as one of their own, and now they were all bound together by a common purpose. In the evenings, the tribe gathered around the fire, sharing stories and experiences. Jack sat among them, listening to the tales of the past, of ancestors who had fought to protect the land. The warriors spoke of honor and sacrifice, of the strength that came from unity. As he listened, Jack felt a sense of connection to these people, a bond that went beyond just survival. It was something deeper, something more meaningful. The chief often spoke of the tribe's history, of how they had faced countless challenges and emerged stronger each time. "We are the guardians of this land," the chief would say, "and we will not let anyone take it from us." Jack took those words to heart. He was no longer just a cowboy. He was a guardian too. Days turned into weeks, and the enemy did not return, But that did not mean the tribe could let their guard down. The warriors continued their training, each day pushing themselves harder, becoming stronger. Jack found himself growing alongside them. He was no longer the outsider, the man who had once wandered alone. Now, he was part of the tribe, and together, they were ready for anything. But even as the days passed, the tension never fully left. The threat of the enemy loomed over them, a dark cloud that hung in the air. The chief, ever watchful, kept his people prepared, his focus never wavering. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a deep shade of red, the chief gathered the warriors. "Tonight, we make our stand," he said. "We will not let our guard down any longer. The enemy may not have returned yet, but they will. And when they do, we will be ready." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that none of the warriors could ignore. Jack stood among them, his resolve firm. He was ready. He had fought with these people before, and now he would fight again. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the clear sky, the tribe prepared for what was to come. They moved swiftly and silently, the warriors positioned along the borders of their territory, watching for any sign of the enemy. Jack stood at his post, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been one to wait quietly, but tonight, he had no choice. The enemy was out there, somewhere, and they would come for the tribe. Jack's grip tightened on his rifle as he waited, his senses heightened. Every sound, every movement in the distance, set his nerves on edge. Hours passed, the night stretching on endlessly. Then, just as the moon reached its peak, a shadow moved on the horizon. Jack's eyes narrowed as he saw figures in the distance. The enemy had come. The time for waiting was over. The tribe's warriors moved swiftly into position, their movements synchronized, ready for the battle that was about to unfold. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline as the sounds of hooves grew louder, the enemy approaching fast. The chief, standing beside him, gave him a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of the battle that was about to begin. And then, with a roar that shook the ground beneath them, the enemy charged. Jack's heart raced as the battle erupted around him. The sound of gunfire, the clash of swords, and the cries of warriors filled the night air. But amidst the chaos, Jack knew one thing. He was not alone. The tribe stood together, fighting for their home, for their future. And Jack was right there with them, fighting for the same cause. The battle raged on, but the tribe's spirit was unbroken. They had faced the enemy once before and survived. Now, they would do it again. And Jack, the cowboy who had once wandered alone, had become a warrior, one of them, standing strong, ready to protect everything they held dear. The battle that raged through the night slowly began to quiet as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and gold. The warriors of the tribe stood victorious, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat, but their spirits unbroken. Jack stood among them, his heart still racing from the intensity of the fight. He had fought with everything he had, side by side with the tribe, and now, the enemy had been pushed back once more. But even in victory, Jack knew the battle was not truly over. The chief walked toward him, his eyes steady and proud. The two men shared a moment of silence before the chief spoke. "You have proven yourself, Jack," the chief said, his voice calm but full of respect. "Not just with your rifle, but with your heart. You have fought not just for survival, but for something greater." Jack nodded, the weight of the chief's words settling deep within him. He had come to this land as a stranger, unsure of his place in the world. But now, standing beside these people, he had found something he never knew he needed, belonging. The chief placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "We are bound together now, Jack. As family, as warriors, and as protectors of this land." Jack looked around at the faces of the tribe's warriors. They were no longer just people he had fought alongside. They were his people now. Their bond was forged in battle, but it was more than just survival. It was a shared commitment to protect what they held dear, to fight for a future where their way of life could endure. The sound of the warriors gathering around them broke the silence. The tribe had fought and won, but the battle had taken its toll. They had lost comrades, and the cost of victory was always high. The chief raised his hand, calling for silence. "We have stood together through this," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered warriors. "But the fight is not over. There will always be those who seek to take what is ours. We must remain strong, united, and ready to defend our home. Jack's heart swelled with a sense of purpose. The chief was right. This battle was won, but the war for their future would continue. But he no longer felt afraid. He had found his place here, and he would stand with the tribe for as long as it took. As the tribe gathered around the fire that evening, Jack sat with them, his thoughts filled with the journey that had brought him here. He had once lived alone, drifting through life with no real direction. But now, he was part of something greater than himself. A community, a family, a tribe that had welcomed him as one of their own. The chief stood, his eyes scanning the faces of his people. "We have fought and won," he said, his voice filled with pride. "But let us not forget what we are fighting for. We fight for our families. We fight for the land. And we fight for the future of our people. Together, we are stronger than anything that comes our way." Jack looked around at the tribe, feeling the strength of their unity. They were more than just warriors. They were a people bound by history, tradition, and an unbreakable bond. And Jack was now one of them. The chief's words echoed in Jack's mind as he sat by the fire. The battle was over, but the journey was far from finished. There would be more challenges, more battles to fight. But Jack was ready. He had found his purpose, and he would fight for it with everything he had. The sun set over the horizon, casting a final golden light over the land. Jack looked out at the vast expanse before him, feeling a deep connection to the earth beneath his feet. This land was his now, just as much as it was the tribe's, and he would protect it. He had come to the West as a man who had nothing, but now he had everything: a family, a purpose, and a future. And with that, Jack knew the battle for his soul had been won.